Good afternoon and welcome to the session. We are moving to the last block of our journey towards international human resource management practices. So, my dear students, like we have understood the basic concept of international human resource management practices. We have understood what are the basic factors that is required to or that is to be considered by the organizations in its journey from domestic level to with the global organization. We have understood different human resource management practices that essentially are to be taken into consideration for the success of the organizations in its phase of internationalization process. We have also talked of different aspects such as leadership, performances of the organizations, which seems to be most important towards its accomplishment of goals in its internationalization process. Let's talk of some other aspects where we are going to discuss the basic requirements of an organization in its process, what we call it as the industrial relationship system or international organizations. How do they deal with the employees? What are the things that are required to be taken into consideration? All of those things we are going to discuss for today's class, and tomorrow we are going to discuss the different trends that we witness at the present time. So let's start our journey with an insight into industrial relationship system. We'll need to understand it conceptually, and after that we'll see what are the requirements of the international organizations in terms of industrial relationship system, and towards the end we'll see different sort of IR practices in different countries, etc. So let us understand this term industrial relationship. What it says in a very layman's language, if you do understand the relationship that exists between the management and the employees, the management or the workers we do talk of, and whether it is a relationship between the workers and workers, which normally arises out of the terms and conditions of employment. We take that kind of relationship as the industrial relationship. So, what we need to understand is the stakeholders being there at the place of work itself, the any kind of relationship that exists between the executives, managers and the workers and workers, all of them they are covered under the term industrial relations. But whenever we do talk of this industrial relationship system, actually, industrial relationship system is having a deeper insight into it. Whenever we do talk of the industrial relationship system, it is affected by the kind of attitude and the approach that this management does have towards the workers, or the workers do have towards the management itself. We may think of the basic managerial practices like authoritarian style, autocratic style, or maybe a participative style, democratic style, or kind of laissez-faire style, benevolent style. So, how the management of the organization takes the workers into account, how the workers do perceive their management. So, based on that, the industrial relationship system is defined. The history can be traced to understand deeper aspects of that. Like some of the aspects of this industrial relationship system, which is driven from Karl Marx philosophy, Marxism concept. So, their industrial relationship system is established through the process of violences. The objective is to bring social equity, but the assumption is that equity in the society cannot be brought without violence. So, the kind of methods they do adopt to bring that social equity is strikes, lockouts, garrows, etc., etc. Where we do think the basic contributions made by uh, Gandhiji. So we call it as Gandhian philosophy. So Gandhian philosophy is based on the concept of trusteeship, where highest level of cooperation is sought among the employees and the employers itself. So different sort of approaches are there to understand the different sort of relationships that may be there in the organizations related to maintenance of peace and harmony in the organization itself. So, however, whenever we do talk of this industrial relationship system, it's all about the planning process, the supervision process, the direction, the coordination, all those managerial activities that is managers do carry out, right? And with a minimum friction in the organization itself. So, with the minimum sort of disparities, differences of opinion among the employers and employees in the place of work, which will ultimately leads to a level of cooperation, a level of coordination among the employers and employees, and the objective is the well-being of all. So it's not about it's not about satisfying the interest of the management only. It's satisfying the interest of the workers as well. So that is one. But whenever we do talk of this industrial relationship system, let us go deeper insight into it. Whenever we do talk of this IS system, and we refer to the systems approach itself to say that industrial relationship system is not confined to the organizations only. IS system is not confined to the organizations only. It is said that it can be extended based on the kind of traditions, customs, culture, reaction, interactions among the different factors affecting the organizations. Like we are talking of the sociological factors, psychological factors, technological factors, economic factors, political factors. All of these factors do have a significant impact in regulating the behavior of the employees in the organization. That is why, whenever we talk of this industrial relationship system in a very broad sense, we say that can be defined with the characteristics of the country, with the characteristics of the nation, where it represents the nation's culture, it represents the nation's traditions, customs, way of actions. So we cannot limit our thoughts only to the relationship that exists between the employer and employees and is confined to the organization only. Many such factors are responsible for defining the industrial relationship system at the national level itself. And this is what that makes our study more important, because we have to go beyond the traditional conventional approach of understanding IS system, as these approaches will help us or will enable us to deal with various issues in international level. That's right. So let us understand what are the basic aspects of this IS system. Whenever we do talk of this IS system, it is said that it consists of certain actors, means the players, the stakeholders who do define this IS system itself. Certain contexts are the situations, environmental factors, external factors that makes this industrial relationship scenario, or that affects this industrial relationship scenario. Ideology is, as if we have discussed, no, it's all about the attitude and the approach. On what basis these interactions between the management and the workers do take place. So that ideology itself is another one important factor. And which interaction of these things leads to the establishment of certain rules and regulations. And those kind of rules and regulations will enable the organization to regulate the behavior of the workers, to regulate the behavior of the stakeholders on a long run. That is what we need to understand. So it's about a work community. How does it interact with the the management of the organization, and what sort of rules and regulations are framed, affected by those external factors, technological, political, social, economical, leading towards the influence of traditions, customs, culture. All of these defines the industrial relationship systems. Let's understand. Whenever we talk of this industrial relationship system, It's about understanding different institutions which are involved, different players, different roles played by those members, right? And different processes that takes place, and the basic content of the industrial relationship system. So at one point of time, we were able to talk of these institutions. We to talk of these employers, organizations, and federations are one of the important aspects of the IS system. Similarly, we do have these employees organizations or unions. They also have a significant impact. Now, what it happens from both these employers organization and employees organization, they do interact at the place of work to define the IS system. In certain cases, we can find it out that individual employer bargaining is also there. That means what? Here, instead of having employers, organizations, federations, we need to focus on plant level uh, bargaining itself, where we are not going for multi-employer bargaining, we are going for a single employer bargaining. Those things. But you need to understand that employees union is involved, employers union is involved, and we are talking of the government agencies, government bodies. Like here in India, we do have Indian labor conferences, ILCs. We do have the different sort of courts, tribunals. We do have the labor commissioner's office itself, which do regulate the activities related to labor forces in India itself. Now, coming to the basic characteristics, we will talk of employers' organizations, employers' federations, where uh, the member employers do go for bargaining with the workers at industry level. So, it's a group of employers who carry out all those kind of tasks at industry level, not at plant level. But workers' unions do have the label. They can get themselves affiliated to certain nationalized unions and go for a multi-employer bargaining. Otherwise, they can also deal with the issues at plant level with the plant level. In charge, the manager concerned, plant level employer itself. So we call it as the single employer bargaining itself. So it depends on how does the kind of, or what is the kind of environment, what is the kind of culture this organization is having, and based on that only we do come out with different sort of practices. We're talking of managing this managing this internal industrial relationship scenario. Sometimes we do have grievance settlement authorities, we do have managers to take care of each and every activity under the heading. We do have labor relation officers. So these are some of the players who are involved in the process to ensure that there is peace and harmony. Industrial relationship system should be conducted in a smoother way. When we talk of this government involvement, we are talking of labor commissioners, labor officers. They are also be a part of that. Now, how does this happen? We need to understand one thing, that this industrial relationship system is about certain processes. It's a very complicated one, but it does have certain processes. Like you're talking of collective bargaining. Collective bargaining is a process where representative of the workers and the representative of the management, they sit together to finalize the terms and conditions of employment. So it's a participatory forum where workers and management both take part in the decision making process. We are talking of workers' participation in management. Most of the Indian organizations, they do have different forums We are having unit councils, plant councils, sub councils, joint management councils. But out of this, we do have works committee, which is defined under Industrial Dispute Act. So those are the bodies which provides us a different sort of guideline for involving the workers. Nowadays, we do talk of DEIVs, diversity, equity, inclusions, belongingness. But that should have been done at the bottom level of the organization with the workers itself. There should be basic procedures for settlement of grievances of the employees. That is most important. How the grievances of the employees are settled through the process, and how these disputes are settled through the process. Dispute and dispute management system, dispute settlement machineries, we do talk of like we do have conciliations, adjudications, arbitrations, court of inquiries. All of those may lead to the different approaches. So here we can conclude that there may be two different ways where we do talk of a bipartite system through which we can control the entire IR system. Bipartite system says employer-employee. So there may be good interactions among the employers and employees to finalize everything. But sometimes we also depend on the tripartite bodies itself, tripartite, employers, employees, and government as a regulatory authority. So when the dispute or when the grievances take the shape of a dispute, involvement of the government comes in. But through certain processes, defined processes, each and every dispute is settled. That is what we need to understand. And whenever we talk of this industrial relationship system, everything that comes under the purview of the job of an employee comes under the scope. Starting from employment conditions to payments, compensations, working hours, health, safety, welfare, social security, disciplinary norm, everything comes under the scope of industrial relationship system. So here, what we need to understand is that industrial relationship system is all about, we say, a process which the first condition is it has to be derived from the employment relationship. No employment relationships, legally no IR scenario. But industrial relationship system is characterized in two dimensions. We say both conflict and cooperation exist simultaneously. This is a peculiar part. Whenever we talk of these grievances, disputes leading to a kind of conflict among the employers and employees, at the same time, these workers and the management do come out with solutions being present at the place of work only. And this is what is a mandate. This is what is being expected. That is what we need to understand. So both the dimensions are there. We're talking of this IR scenario, which is influenced by technology, socio-economic conditions, political setups, all of those things. And particularly with the involvement of the government, when these rules, regulations, policies, plans of the government are being taken into consideration, that regulates the IR scenario itself. We are talking of equity and fairness as both. Most of the concepts of IR is based on this equity and fairness. Well, like we have understood that majority of the unrests, labor unrest, are related to wages and salaries only, or maybe the financial resources. That is why this equity and fairness, they do provide a foundation of these AI systems. Creating a balance between this power and authority distribution. So, to what extent it should be centralizedly accumulated or it should be decentralized to departments itself. Okay. And environment of integrity, trust, and all of those things. Now, with these fundamentals related to industrial relationship system, let us now talk of the basic aspects of the IR scenario in international organizations. Now, as if we have understood that this government policies, trade unions, they do make a significant impact on the personnel policies, on the IR policies of the organization. So, what we need to understand is the basic factors that may affect the industrial relationship scenarios. Okay. We do talk of any such issue related to wages, salaries, participation, training, dismissal, security, employability, right? Or maybe social security itself. All of those things, they may vary from country to country. So, could it be possible for us to study each and every nation? May not be. But we can think of certain uh, generalized approach. Say the differences if you're talking of is USA farms. They they don't recognize the trade unions, or as compared to UK farms, USA farms recognize the trade unions in less way. USA farms, they do not prefer to join the employer's organization as compared to UK farms. So UK farms do provide this do prefer to negotiate with the workers through these employers associations only, employers federations only. But UK farms, they do not. Normally, as compared to UK farms, USA farms pay higher and offer more generous employee services, employee benefits than local farms, as against UK farms. So these sort of differences will always be there. These sort of differences will always be there. So what is required is that we need to understand the industrial relationship system through the culture of the organization. So it does have a strong influence, strong impact on the IR system. So understanding this, now we can think of the impact that may be generated by the employees and the union or the employees itself. Right? Let's talk of the union's influence. Unions can influence the international HR practices through the wage levels itself. Now, labor cost constitutes a major chunk in the entire cost of production, operational cost. So whenever we are talking of this labor cost, because of the demand of the labor forces, unions, if the level of wages and salaries can be altered, make higher, so there we need to be careful, because that will add direct cost to the cost of production itself. That is what we need to understand, right? And we're talking of workers. They do affect the MNC's ability to vary these employment levels at will itself. Say, for example, in most of the countries, there are regulations, legislations, which limits the employer's ability for the closure of the plant and for layoff, right? Or there are standardized practices. There are standardized practices which regulates the entire activities. That is what we need to understand. Third point, these unions may also restrict the MNC's discretion of social dumping itself. What is the concept of social dumping? What it says? It is shifting of the workload from one region to the other. So ultimately, that is going to affect the workers in a law. But how? Like, this is what we have understood, that workers or the unions making an impact. But how about MNCs response to neutralize the power of labor unions? Now, they do have massive financial resources to absorb losses in a foreign subsidiary itself. That means what? Here we are not dependent on the profit to be generated by a particular unit only. Right? So influence of the workers may not have that impact on the process itself. As because now international players, they do have the option to shift the production units to other countries itself, those countries which can provide them better benefits, facilities. Right? So labor forces may not be demanding at that particular point of time. Similarly, whenever we do talk of this distance itself, most of the time, based on the distance that the corporate house is having with the subsidiary itself, so there may not be a direct communication, may not be a transparent communication or timely communication that may hamper these workers to communicate their grievances towards their grievances to the management itself. So these are the ways in which these workers or the management can influence one another. If we were to talk of the key issues based on the discussions till now, we said that it's all about ensuring the impact of cultures, traditions, value systems, the external factors like the political, social, technological, economical systems. So it's very, very, very difficult for us to understand IR scenario across the national boundaries. Different concepts can be taken by different countries itself. That is what we need to understand. But what is required is we need to understand the technological, industrial, developmental phase. Okay. So, to what extent unions can influence this as well? Methods of union regulation by government. Do they have proper enactments to regulate the behavior? Do they have the influence of these religious organizations on trade union growth and development? Managerial strategies for labor relations. So all of those things needed to be understood in detail so that the core purpose of labor relations can be understood, can be undertaken. That is what we need to talk of. So let us understand what are the key issues that we need to take into account. We say the degree of inter-subsidiary production integration. Sometimes we call it as transnational sourcing patterns. What it says, one country or one subsidiary is dependent on the other subsidiaries for resources. So, whenever we talk of establishing a common industrial relationship policy, so there should be a high level of integration between these subsidiary units itself. But when the subsidiaries depend on others, perhaps going for that level of involvement of the workers may not be there. We are talking of the basic nationality of ownership of the subsidiary itself. Let's talk of this US firms and UK firms itself. US firms, they would like to exercise greater centralized control over the industrial relationship system as against the UK countries. We are talking of US firms, they need to have or they place focus on the management controls, formal management controls, right? And close reporting relationship, close reporting system, which may not be there with UK firms itself. Right? Whereas UK firms, like in Great Britain, they prefer single employer bargaining. Right? So most of the time, this is an exception, excluding this Britain. Right? Most of the European countries believe in bargaining with multiple agents, so they prefer to have a multi-employer bargaining. But US firms, they do not prefer to have multi-employer bargaining itself. So all it depends on the kind of involvement that is there. When we talk of this third such element, international human resource management approach. Earlier we have discussed that a process of going beyond the domestic territory takes different phases. One is the ethnocentric approach, polycentric approach, regiocentric approach, and geocentric approach. Now, where in ethnocentric approach we have discussed that the organization expands to international market, having an assumption that the domestic, like the factors which are responsible for domestic level of success will also lead to the factors at international level. So the industrial relationship system is defined, maybe a replication of that. But we need to understand that international HR practices are different. That is what we need to understand. When we talk of polycentric approach or regiocentric approach, we need to understand that they all do have differences. And that is what that impacts the higher scenario of a particular country. We say the basic subsidiary characteristic. Whenever we talk of the subsidiary characteristics itself, let's talk of few such scenarios. Number one, when a particular subsidiary, that is well established subsidiary, is acquired. So what would be the impact? Now, thing is that when well-established firms are acquired, we need to provide them autonomy. That is what that will make this organization's success on a long term. Whenever we are talking of a particular subsidiary having a key strategic importance to the firm, so there the firms need to have a greater control over the subsidiary? Or whenever I'm thinking of that, say the subsidiary is quite young to take a decision, take a call. So there, the mentors are appointed over there to help these individual organizations, coping with the situation itself. So there is a high degree of interaction between the parent headquarter to the subsidiary itself. When the subsidiary is more dependent on, say, parent headquarter for resources, so their autonomy cannot be given to that particular subsidiary. So there would be maximum corporate involvement in those kind of organizations. Or maybe whenever we do see that a particular subsidiary is performing in a poor way, so there also this involvement of the parent headquarter would be there. So what we need to understand is that different characteristics of the subsidiary will lead to different sort of practices by the management itself. Next, what is characteristics of the home product market itself? Here we need to understand one thing. Whenever we talk of this home product market, to what extent the MNCs can fulfill their part of obligations from the home market or the foreign market? We need to talk of that. Right. So when the parent company feels that these overseas operations are not providing an extra benefit, right? Or when we do say that these parent organizations feel that this domestic level of or domestic market itself is very large and relative to overseas. So there, they believe that the foreign market is an extension of the domestic market. So no such thrust or given to the local culture itself. If we talk of most of the US firms, they do have this as a belief that their domestic market is much bigger, much relative to the international markets itself. So that is why they do depend on their domestic sales process. But this is not the case of UK firms. So for them, the domestic level of consumption is less as compared to the international markets. So different practices, they do have different sort of focuses. That is what. And last, we are talking of the management's attitude towards the union, whether there is a level of cooperation, collaboration, or there is a level of conflict. That is what that defines the ISA graduates. Now, beyond that, if we to talk of these workers, we have already discussed that, like workers to influence the industrial relationship scenario altogether. We have understood that influencing the workers through wage labels, because everything is dependent on the kind of bargaining power that the trade unions do have. But for the MNCs, if they don't calculate it with minor details, that may lead them to have huge failure. That is what we need to understand. And as we discussed that different countries do have legislations to limit the employers or the MNCs approach itself, like closure of the plant, redundancy, layoff programs, right? These sort of the programs cannot be, you know, done at individual plant level. You need to have the influence of the government over there, preventing the global integration itself. That is what you need to understand, that MNCs do make a conscious decision not to integrate or rationalize their operations. Okay? Because to do so, this may lead to different set of industrial and political issues itself. That is what we need to understand. Now, in this, if we to talk of the basic fundamentals of international IR practices, industrial relations practices, so there we need to understand that, as we discussed, uh, industrial relationship practices cannot be studied in a generic way. It has to be based on a particular set of cultures, traditions, customs, behavior, etc., etc. What is required over here is that we need to identify few such points and would like to compare different sort of practices in those kind of countries. Let's talk of Australia first. Whenever we do talk of this Australia, let's discuss all these different countries from different perspectives, like the general description, legal framework, which affects the IR scenario, the employers association, maybe the employees union also will see, trade unions, level of wage negotiations, mediation, conciliation, arbitration as a regulatory body, and any such wage related issue, because most of the time the IR scenario is affected by this wage related issues only. So, whenever we talk of this Australia, we say that in the year 1996, Australia has come out with this Workplace Regulations and other Legislation Amendment Act. So, they provide freedom of association to the workers. There is voluntary membership of the workers in the union itself. Right? And there are clauses against this discriminations based on membership, non-membership, facilitating the establishment of new trade unions, right? And minimum membership was reduced from 100 to 50. Those kind of things will come under that. However, if we to talk of these employers associations, Australian MNCs do believe to go for bargaining at industry level itself. So they do have their own employers association, like the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. That is what. And this employers members are from these organizations in all the states and territories of the Australian industries itself. So they prefer to bargain through this defined general processes. Trade unions, we do have, Australians do have this Australian Council for Trade Unions itself, and this trade unions then it's based on like the professionals, the approach of the industry associates, all of those things. We are talking of these trade unions which are appointed by this appointed by the Australian workplace agreements. This is what a clause that allows these trade unions to appoint as a bargaining agent of the workers, and as we discussed, they do go for a multi-plant bargaining, multi-employer bargaining. So employers associations and federations are there. A peculiar feature of Australia is that they have decentralized the negotiation process, and almost all the negotiations do take place at the industry level or at the territory level itself or at the state level itself. Right? So issues related to the level of wage depends on the kind of organization they are in. That is what we need to discuss. If it comes to mediation, conciliation, arbitration itself, yes, Australian people do believe a compulsory mediation, conciliation, and arbitration itself. So it has been made compulsory. Wage-related issues are there, right? But Australians do not have a statutory minimum wage. That is one. And however, a multitude of these wage labels are defined for different crafts and different operations of the organization. So overall, the practices are regulated, and the like we said, no, the people who believe to have industry level interactions to regulate the rules and regulations in Australia itself. We were talking of UK. We do say that the Employment Relation Act, which was amended in the 1999, they come out with certain provisions like the compulsory recognition of unions, no provisions for extension of collective agreements itself. Right? The contents of the agreements are to be done at the company level, right? But it's very diverse. That is what we need to understand. If it comes to employees' involvement, in fact, there is no general legal requirement for the employees to be involved in the process. However, certain provisions are there through which the constitution of employee representatives is a platform through which workers can contribute their grievances. We say employers association. Yes, we have the Confederation of British Industries as one of the important employers association for the UK people itself, right? And these farms and industries are being considered for that. And however, there's a difference, as we need to understand one thing, that people of Britain, UK, right, they do maintain a very low profile as compared to other countries in the European economy. So that is what we say in terms of trade unions. This is the Central Trade Union Organization, Trade Union Congress, and Trade Union Congress represents the trade union movement as a whole. So it's not to regulate the activities itself. Right? And more than 200 registered unions are there, and the Trade Union Congress holds majority of their membership, more than 70 of the membership itself. Right? Levels of wage negotiation. as we compared Australians, they don't have only the prestige on minimum. So here the process is decentralized, and mediation, conciliation, arbitration is more controlled by an advisory, conciliation, and arbitration service body, where the largest part is individual level of conciliation itself. Arbitration is relatively only a small part of the work, and that is why this power distribution system is being considered over there. Okay. And wage related issues. The National Minimum Wage Act was enacted on, okay. And whenever we do talk of this minimum wage was introduced over there, the statutory sick pay is being paid to the employees over there. And whenever we do talk of this paper, like this promotion of employee participation in profits and enterprise results itself. So UK people do prefer to have legislations related to the tax advantages to the farms promoting this paper itself, and that must be like approved by the Inland Revenue Services. All of those things are the benefits given to the workers over there in UK itself. Considering other European economy, like if we to talk of this German itself, German constitution guarantees right to collective bargaining. They guarantee the freedom of association, right? So there is no such mandatory regulation which regulates the wages. So there is no statutory minimum wage. There is no statutory right to strike itself, and employers and trade unions, they do act simultaneously so that the relationship can be maintained there in a proper way altogether. We are talking of the involvement of the workers itself. Yes, through these works councils, these workers can be involved in the entire process itself. So the workers do have the right to be informed, make suggestions, heard to be consulted, right? Co-determination rights are given to the workers itself. So involvement of the workers on a long run is definite over there. We do talk of employers association. Yes, they, Germany's people, like European countries, believe in the bargaining at industry level itself. So they do have this employers association, the BDA, which comprises of 65 federations, right? And 1,000 employers associations may be there in Germany itself. Right? Trade unions, workers associations are specific, right? And is related to that particular industry itself. So it's irrespective of the skill of the workers itself. We need to understand level of wage. Here, collective bargaining can take place only among the unions and individual employers, right? Or employers associations itself. So as if we have discussed that there is no such statutory minimum wage, only collectively agreed wage establish the minimum standards. So that has to be taken into consideration for that. If we're talking of Japan itself, Japan, their constitution guarantees the fundamental rights, the freedom of association, freedom of collective bargaining, freedom to act collectively. So the trade union laws are there. Trade union laws provide the trade unions to regulate the trade unions, to regulate unfair labor practices itself. And labor relation adjustment laws are there, which regulates the disputes among the workers itself and the management, and they regulate the kind of settlement procedures also. That's what we need to understand. Employees' involvement, if you do talk of, yes, the trade union law completely prohibits the employers from having unfair labor practices itself. So, the collective bargaining prejudicial treatments of the union members are not there. So, in Japan, the workers are being consulted, but officially they're not being involved because the law is very strict for the employers itself. We're talking of employers association. Yes, they do have Japanese Federation of Employers Association, where it takes more number of employees. And in Japan, basically, the unions do prefer to have bargaining and negotiation at the plant level only. That is why, because everything is taken care of. Whenever we talk of these unions, Japanese Trade Union Confederation, which takes more than 60% of the total union membership itself, right? And based on that only, the kind of relationship is defined. We're talking of the level of wage negotiation, where the trade unions they often offer the proposal which is negotiated, right? And the wages increase. So they're the pattern setters, we can see. In terms of mediation, conciliation, and arbitration, yes, disputes among the labor and management is resolved through this conciliation, mediation, and arbitration, with a thrust on the voluntary settlement of labor disputes. That is what we need to understand. Wage-related issues, minimum wage council is there to fix the minimum level of wage that are to be given to the workers itself, which constitutes a major issue while dealing with the workers itself. And they do promote this paper where the employees' participation in company results are increasing and new benefit structures are being provided to the workers itself. Towards the end, let's talk of another one economy, US economy. Most of the time, like in our previous discussions also, we have understood that US and UK economies, they do have differences in terms of their labor practices altogether. Let's talk of that. And if you do talk of the general description legal framework itself, there is the federal government. They provide statutory framework for contracts between these employers and the employees itself. Statutory minimum wage is also defined. Okay. However, the non-management workers, right, for them who work beyond 40 hours, for them the overtime rate is also fixed. This is almost 150% of their regular payment structure itself. Right. But if we to talk of the involvement of the employees, there is a ban, strict ban on non-trade union representation. As such, the concept of participation is being adopted, but non-trade union representation, if at all is there, it is not being welcomed. Right? So organizations, they exclude the trade unions. The ban prevents itself the establishment of these in-house bodies to promote cooperations and joint methods of solving itself. So they don't believe in multi-employer bargaining. So each and every dispute is settled within the nation itself, within the local limits only. That is what we need to understand. Trade unions, yes, they do have like American Federation of State, County and Municipal Employees Unions, United Auto Workers, United Steel Workers of America, So unionism is preferred in US economics itself. And level of wage as is being decided with the local authorities only. Yes, in terms of mediation, conciliation, they provide a contract negotiation, right? And alternative methods of settlement of disputes are also being promoted, but is done at a voluntary level itself. They also prefer this paper. And towards the end, if you talk of Indian scenario itself, yes, India, the entire rules regulations are regulated by the centralized bodies, like we do have uh, Second National Commission on Labor, which was set up in the year 1999. They do provide a lot of guidelines related to layoffs, retrenchments, contract labor, core production services. They have suggested that trade unions with minimum 66% of membership should only be taken as a single negotiating agent. So many guidelines are being provided by this second National Commission on Labor itself. Employees' involvement, yes, we do have various participating forums like workers' participation in management. We do have plant councils, joint councils, sub councils, through which all of them need to take part. Employers Association, we do have All India Organization of Employers, right, representing manufacturing sectors, banking sector, insurance, commercial establishment. Trade unions, we do have many trade unions, but nationalized, we do have AITUC, INTUC, and the Hind Mazdoor Sabha, HMS, all of those. So, what is important is going international is not an important, as we need to understand the different aspects of the industrial relationship system, which may vary from country to country, nation to nation, in terms of its cultural aspects. So let's wind up over our session over here, and thank you very much once again. We'll join for the next class.